Good morning and welcome to Moving Iron Podcast Morning Market Roundup with Chip Nellinger. Chip, kind of a quiet day overall. The market's a little bit down. Pro Farmer kind of made their tour around the countryside there, up in the northern part of the Corn Belt, and so it looks like they're not for sure, but market's down a little bit.
Yeah, market's down a little bit. We don't have a lot of news out. Pro Farmer tours going on, and that's always closely watched by the market, especially nowadays with Twitter. I mean, you have participants tweeting essentially almost from every stop they make. And then obviously at the end of every day, you get the Pro Farmer results from that state. So, keep in mind there's two legs of the tour. There's an eastern leg and a western leg. So we saw a little bit of bearish news yesterday. The South Dakota crop was pegged like 20% bigger than a year ago. Ohio was larger than a year ago as well. I think they pegged Ohio mid 170s. Now keep in mind, those Ohio and South Dakota, had some issues last year, each of those states. And so they have bounced back. But the South Dakota crop especially was way higher than what the USDA had them pegged at. Now, keep in mind here, there's not a strong correlation to what the Pro Farmer Tour comes out with state by state and comparing that to the USDA state numbers. But it's the trend the market's looking for. So long story short, the Pro Farmer Tour, at least from the first day, saw pretty good yields and maybe a little higher than what the market expected. There's been some rain that's moved through as well here the last, 3 or 4 days over the weekend and here into Monday, Tuesday. Very beneficial rainfall in some areas, well over an inch, helping stabilize corn, probably definitely adding some yield potential to some beans. And that's a little bit of a negative influence as well. So we are seeing the markets relax here a little bit. Right now corn's down 2 1/4, beans are down 1 1/4 in the overnight. The wheat market's down 10. It's getting beat up a little bit here. Some rains in Australia. They've been very, very dry there. I don't think it's the end of the line here. I don't think it's a good assumption yet that the high's been put in wheat because there are some very definite problems out of the Black Sea area and the European crop there that's still kind of being digested. But right now, all the influence is just a touch negative with the weather, especially kind of taking front and center here in the Pro Farmer Tour. So they move on today. They're into Nebraska today and Indiana. By late day, they're probably moving into western Iowa and eastern Illinois. So that crop progresses, and the market's going to hang on every tweet and yield report that comes out from the Pro Farmer Tour, knocking on the door of this Chinese-U.S. trade negotiations. I believe those are set for Wednesday and Thursday. Obviously, the bean market is going to be highly sensitive and potentially wildly volatile to any news that comes out of there, good or bad. And so let's hope, knock on wood, that we get a good result in that. And we can kind of continue on the path of getting this thing figured out because it is very important for agriculture, obviously. So that's, big news here later in the week. What will they say, if anything? Maybe that's 2 days of meetings and, that we don't get much news, but, we agree both sides to continue talks. So I think that'll be a, moral victory. What we don't want to see is, that meeting end with still some, hurt feelings and no real movement in the right direction. That would be pretty negative to the bean market, especially given some of these rains that have moved through the last few days.
Yeah.
Outside markets a little bit volatile. Dollar's been fluctuating a little bit. It's a little bit lower today, so that could give us a little bit of support. But that dollar has been very, very volatile recently. Still issues with Turkey that's really pushing the euro currency around and reflecting on the dollar as well. So we got a lot, to throw at these markets. some very early harvest starting in the south, southern Indiana. There's a little bit of harvest starting. I would say Missouri has started. They've had a lot of dry weather there, so that crop is really pushed along in Missouri. But I'd say you get another week to 10 days under our belts, assuming that's dry and no more rain, you're going to have a lot of harvest activity, through Kentucky, southern Illinois, southern Indiana. So it's on our doorstep here, and that always seems to cap the market a little bit once harvest starts. So a lot to digest, a lot of potential volatility. Stay tuned, I guess, because the fun's not over yet.
Yeah. Well, looks like the hog market's kind of had some moves here of late. They've got some, I guess, with the Mexico news and potential Chinese news, plus the African swine flu or whatever it is that's driving that around.
Exactly. I'm not super familiar with that, other than it is potentially decimating to a hog herd. Mm-hmm. They found that it's hard to control. That's in China, I believe. They have just massive amounts of hogs there. They're massive consumer of hogs. And so the China-U.S. trade talks kind of got the ball rolling a little bit. Obviously, if we can get things figured out there, they have been a buyer of U.S. pork. The Mexico situation, NAFTA, sounds like that's progressing and ongoing, and that's heading in the right direction. That's a big deal there. And then you add on this swine flu, especially in a market that's just been beat up and making new contract lows, and we had a massive amount of short covering. Lower yesterday, but I don't know what it is. I don't have a chart pulled up here. $10 off the lows in about 3 trading sessions. So a little bit of back and fill here isn't unexpected, but it just goes to show you how sensitive this is. It's whether you're talking about livestock markets, grain markets. It's not about just what's in our backyard anymore. It is very much a world market, more than it ever has been. It's all interrelated. Trade is a huge issue, obviously, and that's kind of front and center right now. And world supply and demand still matters. So, it's despite big crops here, despite some of the largest hog numbers we've seen, it's a world market, and we can still see rallies with large supply domestically if there's problems in other areas of the world, and we're starting to see that. And it's a little bit of a head scratcher, It's like, well, we got maybe a record bean crop going, we've got maybe a record corn crop, and yet we're well off the lows. How can that happen? But it's because it's a world situation, and we have to look more than outside our back door here.
Yeah. One more question here on the wheat market. I think Russia's officially kind of quit exporting wheat. Seems like they've kind of shut that down. And so how do you see that affecting the wheat market worldwide? And how do you see that? We've got a ton of wheat laying around out here, and, so carryover is going to start going down. So how do you see that affecting the wheat market?
Yeah, very, very supportive. I don't know. So here's how Russia works. We've talked about this before a couple weeks ago, I remember. Mm-hmm. You start seeing hints, we're gonna ban exports. We're gonna put an export tax on. We're gonna limit export. And this is bad. And then they, 12 hours later, they say, no, we didn't. We're not going to do that. Where there's smoke, there's fire, right? We know the world knows there's a problem. They had a big drought, one of the worst droughts in 10, 15 years in that area of the world, stretching into Europe as well. And so that's why we rallied off the lows in the wheat market. And it's a slow process, right? So they're going to still export some, but certainly not what they have in the last few years. And that area, just off the top of my head, like a year ago, equates to, I think, just shy of 40% of the world exports comes out of Europe and Russia and Ukraine. So it's a big area. And if they're going to be limited in supply, goes back to this world supply and demand situation. We have big supplies here. What we should slowly start seeing, and I think we've already seen that, we've had a couple decent weeks of exports. You should start seeing our exports take over and increasing and that usage switching here in the United States, because we have plentiful supplies that are cheaper. And, as the crop size shrinks in Europe and the Black Sea area, their domestic prices are increasing. That in itself is going to slow demand down from there and slow their exports. So it should be long-term beneficial. Obviously, like you've seen the last couple of days, wheat is not going to go straight up, but we are in a very definite uptrend now, and making higher highs and higher lows. So we will not go straight up, but longer term, that should become very, very supportive to wheat over, say, the next 3 to 6 months. It should result in better demand here. It's shrinking world feed wheat supplies, because that European crop, and part of the Russian and Black Sea crop is feed wheat quality. So that's going to spill over, shrink feed wheat supplies, help support corn. The next substitute, if there's no feed wheat supplies available, we're going to go to something that we can substitute. You can substitute corn very easily. Guess what? We've got a lot of corn here. We're going to about set to harvest what looks like a potential record crop. So it has big implications longer term for wheat as well as corn. And it's a good thing, right? It's breaking a trend of about 4 to 5 years where we've seen world stocks increase in corn and wheat to burdensome levels in wheat. Well, now we've turned the corner. We've had some production problems in parts of the world. We're shrinking that supply. Because of low prices, we've increased demand. We've lowered production and acreage, and now we're kind of seeing the pendulum swing the other way. I mean, it's I'm an econ major, and it's that's econ 101 in action. It's kind of interesting to see how that works in the real world, but longer term, it's a good thing. 3 to 6 months, we ought to see better demand in the United States on wheat, and it should help secure pretty good corn demand as well. And that's what we need, because according to the USDA in August, we're set to harvest a record corn crop here. We'll see what Pro Farmer has to say on that, on the final yield estimate on Friday. But it's a big crop.
Right on. All right, Chip, so plenty of volatility out there. If you guys want to talk about their marketing plan and some risk management that you guys can do there at Blue Reef, how would they do that?
Yeah, best way is just call our office, 309-550-7213. We'd be happy to chat with you, and we'll take a look at your plan and give you some advice on how you might be able to improve that.
Right on. All right, Chip. Well, I guess we're done here. So till tomorrow, have a good day.
All right. You do the same. We'll talk in the morning.
All right. Thanks, Chip.
Thanks.